Today we're going to look at this. This is a 2022 Honda ADV150 adventure scooter. Adventure vehicles, adventure motorcycles are in high demand. It's the segment in the motorcycle world that is always increasing. So Honda saw a little niche in it and they made the ADV150. Now they have the ADV160. And today I'm going to take you around the scooter and show you why it's such a brilliant little scooter. I bought this, of course, used, and you can get decent bargains on them, but they do hold their value. I had the Yamaha 125 Zuma, and I just sold it. I love the styling of it, and when you look at a lot of the Chinese knockoffs, they are going after that. And lately I've been seeing some Chinese knockoffs of the ADV, but this is still one of the best. You want to definitely have the Japanese brands because I have seen so many Chinese bikes on the side of the road with barely any miles. 5,000 miles, those things are rattling to death. This particular one has got 10,000 miles, and as you might expect, it's riding as if it's brand new. To give you some specs, this is a 2022 Honda ADV150. It's got a 149.3cc liquid-cooled 4-stroke engine, got a keyless ignition, and one of the incredible things about this is that it's got quite a bit of suspension for a scooter. The rear has got shoei shocks and 4 inches of travel. The front has got a single hydraulic caliper 240mm disc, and the rear still uses a mechanical brake with a drum. And in the front, it's got a 110/80 14-inch tire, and in the rear, it's got a 130/70 So it's got a smaller tire in the rear than in the front. Very different from the PCX that uses both 14s. The length, 76.8, width 30 inches. But what is going to set this apart from a lot of bikes is the seat height. It's a little bit higher than most with 31.3. It's got 6.5 inches of ground clearance, which is good. And the fuel capacity is 2.1 gallons. Curb weight on this, the wet weight is 294 pounds. First, you have a 14-inch tire, and it's pretty thick. One of the things you'll notice is that on the PCX, for example, it's got a 14-inch tire, but it's a thinner tire. It almost feels like it's a bicycle tire. This has got one rotor up front, and it does have ABS. And it's got 5.1 inches of travel in the front, which is unheard of for a scooter. Not even the Zuma 125 had that sort of travel. This is quite nice, and one of the things that you'll find is that these bikes are going to be, most of the time, they're going to be living in the city, and so people want something that's a little bit more comfortable in potholes and stuff, and this one does seem to do very well with it. It also helps to have thicker tires. When you have a thicker tire, it absorbs a lot more of the bumps from the road. Brakes are really good on it. Like I said, it's got ABS. A lot of Honda equipment, a lot of Honda models, they have link braking as opposed to ABS, but this one has got proper ABS just in the front. Very aggressive front end. It's almost reminiscent of the Africa Twin. It's got a mean look to it. And all of these lights are LEDs, so they are very efficient and they work fairly well at night. And look at that, they even have you ADV on here, so they branded it right off. It's got an adjustable windscreen. There's these 2 dials here, and you push it like this, and you can move it up and down. Now the windscreen is pretty tiny, and one thing I would recommend is getting a larger one, especially if you ride in the winter. Of course, Honda, they gave us LED turn signals, both front and rear. Headlights are LEDs. This is not something that I would expect in a scooter because they tend to put cheap stuff on all the scooters, but this is such a good idea. Right off the bat, just give us that. It's going to be much nicer, and they're really good. One of the really good things about these particular bikes, including the PCX, is the way you sit on them. Of course, there's this hump in the middle, and you might think that's a terrible idea because a lot of scooter guys, they want that flat floorboard. But what happens with a flat floorboard is that All of this stuff has to go somewhere, and what it tends to do, it goes underneath and creates the platform much higher up. So it creates a less than desirable position for your feet. On this, your feet are much more natural than a lot of bikes would be. This is a much better position for most riders that are average height. Even though there's this hump, it really doesn't matter too much. And you also have the position here to put your foot slightly up. Now, most people are not going to be able to fit their entire feet, but it helps with stretching having your foot up here. So I do like that they gave us nice cushy rubber here. Of course, you can peel this out to access this and remove the plastics. Behind here, you have your liquid cooling radiator. It's interesting that they have a couple of patterns here. This is like a honeycomb pattern right here. And this is just a regular kind of vent towards this way. So air is going to flow this way towards the radiator. Has hit the ground one time, and you can see some of the marks here on the plastic. It's no big deal. You might opt to remove these because these bikes might sound pretty good with an aftermarket exhaust. One thing you do have to do is remove the exhaust if you change the wheel, which is a pain, but if you do any maintenance on scooters, that's pretty much standard. But the exhaust is humongous, but it still looks good. You know, it's a good looking exhaust as opposed to most scooters where they just have a regular round pipe. This is kind of like an octagon shape. Quite a bit of suspension, 4 inches as opposed to the 3 inches that a PCX might have. This is by Shoei, and as you might know, Shoei makes really good components. So I am surprised that Honda did put it here. And look at the coils for the rear suspension. They're progressive coils. It's wound up much tighter here than at the bottom. Really interesting that Honda decided to do this. I love it. I love the suspension on it for a scooter. That's one of my complaints most of the time, is that scooter suspension is just terrible. You're basically feeling all the potholes. On this, it's better. This is a large tire. That's a large tire for a bike. But the interesting thing is that Honda decided to give you a 13-inch tire for the rear and a 14 for the front. And I was wondering, why would they do that? And I think it's to create a little bit more suspension in the rear by having the Shoei suspension. I would much rather have 2 14s, but it could also be limited lack of the width of rubber. I don't know, but I would prefer 14s. So in combination with the plusher suspension that you have, you also have the wide tire that absorbs a lot of the impact. Of course, look at this. In the back, you have a very interesting taillight. This taillight is the brightest taillight I've ever had on any bike. And I like the styling of it. It's just not one single piece like this. It kind of flows, it flares out towards the sides. You have the Honda logo up here, and you have 2 more LED blinkers in the rear that are slightly lower than the front ones. I'm gonna turn it on. That's the LEDs are on. You see the blinkers are on. This does have 4-way hazards, and look at that. And when you look at it, it's actually an X. There's like an X pattern to it. And you're starting to see that. Even on the new BMW GSs, the headlights are X-shaped. So one of the interesting things about Hondas, including the PCXs and a lot of their scooters, they have this thing called ESP. And you can see it right there. It's called Enhanced Smart Power. And the Honda creates a very efficient vehicle. And another thing about the starting of these bikes. On these bikes, it doesn't use a starter like most conventional motorcycles. It uses apparently a different alternator to start the bike. So every time you turn it off, it always puts it in the right place for starting. So it's a good platform for the auto start, auto stop type of technology that you would see in Europe. And as a matter of fact, a lot of the Honda PCXs in Europe have this technology. I kind of wish that they brought it to the US, but I read that there were safety concerns. I'm not really sure exactly why, because they have it in cars, but they didn't want to bring it to the US with that technology. With the addition of the center stand, you also have a kickstand. This hump actually kind of comes out a little bit more than a lot of scooters like the PCX. You push in and it opens. And you also have a USB adapter inside, or a 12-volt socket. Pretty standard for a lot of scooters these days. This is the best way of filling up, is having your gas cap right there. If you want to open it, you use the ignition. There's a position and you just open it up. Now, one thing that's interesting about this particular setup as opposed to a lot of bikes, this is a little bit on the taller side. So as you get on and off the bike, I do scrape my boots sometimes on the plastic. So I'm already creating a bunch of stuff here, which I don't like. And of course, if you forgot that you have an ADV, they put it right there so you can see it. You have your rear brake, you have your high beam, you have your horn, and you have your turn signals. And of course, your brake. And then this is probably the best handbrake that I have seen on a bike. Going from the Honda PCX to this, you can see why they decided to do this. You push in your brake, you do that, and it's in the parking brake. If you want to remove it, push it down, and that's it. So you can do this with just one hand. And on the right side, you have your throttle, you have four-way indicators, hazards, and then of course your start button and your kill switch. And of course your front brake. Your mirrors are also interesting. They kind of echo a lot of the design of the bike. They could have given you just round mirrors, but they gave us these angular, aggressive ones that resemble the style of the bike. A lot of mirrors, they're kind of bulky. These are tapered, so they're almost triangular shape like a UFO. One of the best things that you could get on a bike is this. This is keyless ignition. It uses a key fob that you can put in your pocket, and right now it's on the off position, and you can move it to the seat fuel. The seat opens up the seat, push the fuel, it opens up the fuel. And of course, if you want to start the bike, you put it to the on position, you hit that fuel injector, kick in, and it's ready to fire up. And here is the fuel door and the fuel cap. Of course, they gave us one of these fuel caps again, and this is kind of like a deep pocket here, more deep than the PCX, which is interesting. You could even use it to store various things. And look at this, what I found. A piece of paper. Why would there be a piece of paper over there? It's so deep that you can't really see the level of your fuel as it goes up to the filler neck. And let's look at that seat. This is probably one of the biggest differences between this and a standard scooter. The seat height is much taller. So if you are a little bit on the shorter side, you might be tiptoeing a scooter. And that's not traditionally something that happens. But of course, you have much more suspension. The seat has got two different textures. One texture here with stitching, and then this part is pretty smooth. And it does come down to here. It's got this, which kind of resembles a little bit of a lumbar support, but it's not. And of course, when you hit that switch, you can open that up. And it has a spring that lets you open up the seat. This particular bike does not have the stock handrails. I do have them, but it's got a top rack, which is always much better. You'll also have the ability of your passenger just to hold on to here, and you have this. This is a great idea because you can put an additional rack or top case here. Open up the seat. I do have the stock handrails here, which I do not use, and the battery is here. And you don't have to access it using a Phillips. You could actually access it just by pushing down on these little tabs. Much better design. And the battery's there and the fuses are there. And then here you have a toolkit and a little bit of a recess because you can ideally put a helmet here and close it. The handlebars are actually kind of flat. the way they made this, it almost resembles a little bit of a motocross handlebar, which is good. One thing though is that the position is not as comfortable as, say, as the PCX, but it does feel sportier. There's also a thing you can do here that you can't do on a regular scooter. You can stand up on this. Now you can stand up on most bikes, but because of the position with your legs, it's a little difficult. On this, it kind of feels natural. It doesn't feel as natural as a proper dirt bike, but on this, it does feel like you can do jumps and go off-road. Here you have dummy lights, which include your blinkers, your headlight, your engine light, your liquid, your temperature, and then your key. In case you're in proximity with your key, it will show up. And over here you have your information, which is a little bit clustered with a lot of things that doesn't seem that interesting. But I do appreciate some of its features. First of all, you have a little hat here because this screen is a little bit hard to see in direct sunlight. And then you have one button, two buttons. This is the select button, this is the set button. And when you turn on the key, here you have your fuel, you have a average fuel consumption here, and right in the middle, of course, you have your speedo, you have a clock, you have a date, 10 to 9th, which is wrong. Trip 1, you have also trip B. You can kind of cycle through these. Trip B, total 10,000 miles. And then you can reset using this button. And then you have some other information, which is the instant fuel consumption. There's a little bit less space between you and the front here. And the handlebars, they're flatter, but at the same time, you also have the ability of standing up when riding, which is something that scooters generally are not meant to do because they feel very unbalanced. It feels like you're going to fall over. But this feels a little bit wider at the bottom than the PCX. And when you stand up for a jump, it doesn't feel like you're going to have an accident. But these handlebars don't seem to be long-term comfort, as comfortable as the PCX, and they do feel like they're a little bit more scrunched because it feels like you're in a more aggressive position, but still comfortable. I can ride this for hours without any discomfort. And you also have the ability of putting your feet slightly up here, and you have quite a bit of space to sit back if you're getting tired. So you have a lot of flexibility on it. Another thing I'll say is that this bike is taller. So one of the things that happens is that, you know, I'm 5'9", and most bikes fit me pretty well. This fits me quite well. But the problem is this mounting it, sometimes you brush over this and the plastic. So I can see this getting pretty worn out after a while, especially if you do a lot of deliveries. Now, the only reason I say that is because on the Honda PCX, the position here is much lower and it's much easier to get on and off the bike. This bike in comparison feels like it's an SUV because it's kind of tall, and it is nice having a taller bike. So it's a small compromise as opposed to the PCX. Of course, you do have much better suspension on this, not only better, but much more comfortable with longer travel. All right, let's start the bike so you guys can hear what she sounds like. So the first thing you have to do is just make sure you have the key nearby, put it in your pocket, you turn it to the on position, and then hit start. That's pretty much how she sounds. It's a effortless bike to own. So the next thing we're going to do, we're just going to ride it around and see how she behaves. Let's go. A little bit sluggish going around corners, but I think it's just me not being used to it. Sure, but you know, that's one thing. If you're a shorter rider, and even if you're doing delivery, the constant throwing your leg over this hump It's no big deal, but on the PCX it's so much lower, or at least it's like 1 or 2 inches lower. Will handle these bumps so much better than the PCX. That's one of the worst things about the PCX, is that it's really abrupt in those speed bumps. Even these are like very easy to go over, but with the suspension that this has, it's so much nicer. The bike actually kind of feels natural standing while riding, or just kind of standing on your platform here. It does feel like you could do some jumps and go over certain things. On the PCX, standing up feels really unstable. Like it's just not a good bike for it. But look, this one actually feels like you can stand up on it. First fill up for the ADV150. To cross some railroad tracks here. The PCX is all over the place here. I'm still gonna, oh yeah, much better than the PCX. Look at the headlights. The headlights are so much better. What are you doing? Well, I guess he's backing up, but no turn signal, nothing. By the way, ABS brakes work great. It's coming, and I know I need a little bit more wind protection than what it has now. That's the Honda ADV150. Now, for me, I've always been into large motorcycles. I've had quite a few of them. This thing can go 63 miles per hour, so it's highway legal, even though I wouldn't recommend riding for very long periods on the highway with this. It is a fantastic bike. And if you are the type of person that doesn't really care about going 150 miles an hour, then this is the right bike for you. The CVT on it, the transmission is perfect. It's super smooth. It's not like the Honda Super Cub that's got the semi-manual transmission that's a little clunky. This, you twist the throttle and it's smoothness throughout. It actually is faster than a lot of cars off the line. So yeah, for not a lot of money, you can get one of these and it's absolutely perfect. The fuel injection on it is great. I imagine that the Honda ADV160 is better than this, as they tend to do as they progress. But at the same time, if you want a good deal on a bike, you get the 150. If you want a good deal on the CRF 300, get the 250. It's not a big deal, other than resale. And these do hold their value very well. Any ADV bike holds its value well. That's it, guys. I hope you enjoy this little insight onto the Honda ADV150, and I'll see you in the next video.